Here's something the sport of kings figured out a long time ago. Speed has a ceiling. Not in theory, in practice, in the dirt, with the whole world watching. Modern thoroughbred racing is the most scientifically optimized sport on the planet. The bloodlines are mapped like constellations. The genetics dissected by teams with more data than most research institutions. Every variable, bone density, lung capacity, stride mechanics, studied, cross-referenced, and bred toward perfection for over 300 years. And what that process produced is parity. Walk into any Grade 1 race today, and you are looking at horses so evenly matched that races are decided by millimeters. A neck, a nose, a photograph so close that cameras moving at 1,000 frames per second barely catch it. Blowouts don't happen at the elite level anymore. The math won't allow it. Unless you go back 50 years, to a chestnut colt named Secretariat, who crossed the finish line of the Belmont Stakes 31 lengths ahead of his nearest competitor, against world-class horses. On the grandest stage the sport had. The experts looked at that footage, shook their heads and said, "Never again." Science had closed the door. In September 2022, a horse named Flightline walked onto the dirt at Del Mar and quietly broke everything they thought they knew. Every story like this starts with a number. For Flightline, that number was $1 million. The price paid for him as a yearling. A horse who had never raced, never proved a thing, who was nothing yet but a promise written in genetics. His sire was Thoroughbred, one of the most dominant breeding stallions of the modern era. His pedigree read less like a bloodline and more like a blueprint for something dangerous. Before he ever touched a racetrack, he nearly destroyed himself standing still. A freakish accident in his own stall left him with a severe wound and months of lost training time. A career that was supposed to begin with thunder began instead with silence and uncertainty. When he finally made it to the track, the whispers started immediately. Not because he was slow, because he was the opposite of slow. His morning workout times were alarming. His trainer, John Sadler, was doing something almost unheard of, actively trying to hold the horse back. Not from lack of fitness, but because Flightline was moving at speeds that threatened to tear himself apart before the real races began. Imagine holding back a Ferrari in first gear because you're terrified of what happens when it finds second. He won his first 4 races the way a hurricane passes through a town, completely, without negotiation. But each win came with an asterisk from the critics, because each race was short. A sprint, a showcase of raw velocity. The doubters had one specific question: what happens when the distance gets real? The 2022 Pacific Classic at Del Mar was 1.25 miles, the longest, most demanding test at the elite level. Dubai World Cup winner Country Grammar was in the gate. Multiple Grade 1 champions. Horses who had run long distances against the world's best and won. The critics were loud and clear. Flightline was a sprinter. A flashy, expensive sprinter. Put him against seasoned distance horses and the math would correct itself. The math had other plans. Del Mar sits at the edge of California, where Pacific Ocean air mixes with the smell of salt and something older. The electric tension that gathers in places where extraordinary things are about to happen. September 3rd, 2022. The gates load. 8 of the best horses on the continent stand coiled in a row. Every conventional strategy in long-distance racing says the same thing. Settle. Save energy. Don't burn your horse early. Flightline's jockey, Flevian Prat, did not settle. Flightline went straight to the front with intention, pressing the pace alongside Country Grammar, who had every reason to believe he belonged there. For half a mile, you could still tell yourself this was a race. At the 3/4 mile mark, something shifted. The other jockeys began to move, hands pumping, bodies working, asking their horses for everything. The universal signal of a competitive stretch drive. And then there was Flavian Prat, sitting perfectly still. Both hands quiet. No urgency. A man watching a sunset, completely unbothered by the chaos around him. Flightline had not been asked a single question yet. What happened next lasted only seconds, but those who witnessed it reached for the language usually reserved for natural phenomena. Flightline simply left. Not gradually, he ceased to be in the same race as the other horses. The world-class field appeared to stop, as though they'd run into an invisible wall or found the ground beneath them suddenly soft and impossible. The announcer abandoned analysis entirely. Flightline is in a different zip code. He crossed the wire 19¼ lengths clear, against the best dirt horses on the planet, at 1.25 miles, after running aggressively on the front end from the opening jump. The crowd didn't cheer immediately. There was a moment, visible in the footage, where everyone just stared, because they had never seen that before. Not in this era, not like this. Horse racing runs on speed figures, numerical ratings that translate raw race times into standardized scores accounting for track conditions and competition quality. The most widely used system in North America is the Beyer speed figure. A score of 100 is very good. A 110 is elite. A 120 is generational. Flightline earned a 126, the highest number recorded in decades. A figure so far outside the normal distribution that the people who built the system went back and checked their math. The math was correct. Across the Atlantic, Timeform, the prestigious British ratings agency, the global gold standard for thoroughbred evaluation, assessed Flightline and gave him a 143, the highest rating ever assigned to a dirt horse in the history of their system, above every legend the sport had ever produced. The question that makes him genuinely fascinating beyond the spectacle is how. How does a horse do that to a world-class field? The answer lives in two physical traits, operating simultaneously at a level that appeared, for one brief window, to be without precedent. The first is stride length, the distance covered per individual motion. Elite horses cover significant ground per stride. Flightline covered more, measurably, visibly, absurdly more. The second is cruising speed, the velocity a horse can sustain before tapping into emergency reserves. Every horse has a ceiling, a speed at which the body says, "This is the maximum." Flightline's cruising speed appeared to sit at a level other horses could only reach at their absolute limit, gasping, straining, giving everything just to approach the pace at which he was relaxing. He wasn't sprinting in that final stretch. He was maintaining, and that is why the algorithms broke. He ran one more time. The Breeders' Cup Classic, the crown jewel of American racing. He won. Of course he won, with the same completeness that left no room for argument. 6 career starts, 6 wins, 0 defeats. And then he was gone. Not from injury, not from decline. His syndication value had reached $184 million. Every time he raced, that sum walked into a space where 1,000-pound animals run at 40 miles an hour. The risk wasn't worth it. He was retired, his resume barely filling a paragraph, and barely needing one. Flightline's story is, underneath everything, a reminder. 300 years of breeding toward the perfect thoroughbred mostly produces parity, closeness, races decided by photographs. But sometimes, rarely, with no warning whatsoever, the process produces something the model doesn't have language for. For 18 months, a horse with a scar on his side walked out of a California stall and showed the modern world what exists at the absolute outer edge of what a thoroughbred can be. He wasn't an iron horse built over years of campaigns. He was a flash, a meteor, there and then gone, leaving only the light. But that light was a 126 on the Beyer scale. That light was a 143 from Timeform. That light was 19¼ lengths on a Saturday afternoon in September, while a crowd stood in silence because they didn't know what else to do with what they had just witnessed. Some records exist to be broken, and some exist to remind us that every so often, something arrives that wasn't supposed to be possible. Flightline was that thing.